is
let
a
me finish the
country of
question.
three.
No, let me finish the question and then you answer. That's how it works.
It's said that there's no dumb questions, but sometimes that's disproved.
Many Republicans were appalled when Donald Trump succeeded in taking over their party. Some began active resistance, often around something called the Lincoln Project, which raised money to stop Trump winning the presidency. One of its founders was Stephen Schmidt, once a key aide to former Republican presidential candidate Senator John McCain, a war hero who ended up a prisoner of the Viet Cong, for which Trump called him a loser. Stephen Schmidt is no longer with the Lincoln Project, but he remains a fierce critic of Trump, and he joins me now. Welcome to the program, Mr. Schmidt.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're one of a number of Republicans who've made it almost your life's mission in some ways to stop Donald Trump returning to the Oval Office. As things stand, less than 3 weeks out, do you accept that there's, put it no higher than a fair chance, you could fail?
I think there is a chance that Donald Trump could return to the presidency. Intellectually, it's hard to evade that conclusion when you look at the numbers, but I do have a faith in the country that supersedes where the polling is right now, because the simple truth is that we have somebody who's running for the most powerful office in the world, who is promising to deploy the American military against the American people, someone who is promising retribution, someone who is promising to jail political opponents. And the truth is that nobody who has ever promised such things, ever, and I mean ever, in the history of the world, who upon taking power has not done it. So it's a serious moment. I think the American people look at this situation. There's a lot of anger in the country about institutions, a real collapse of trust, a real disgust. And Trump, at the end of the day, is a person to whom people channel their grievance and their anger. He is a focus for them of somebody who can stick it back to all the forces that have impinged on their life in some sense. So we're at a critical moment. He could win, but I don't think he will win.
Now, I understand why you want to stop Trump, and you've just given one of the explanations there right now. But are you really comfortable as a Republican with Kamala Harris as your next president?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, the only issue I care about is fidelity to the 35-word oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, period. And so if you look at the issues, if you care about border security, Donald Trump sabotaged a border security agreement that it would have fixed a structural problem that started a quarter century ago. He killed it. If you look at government spending, as a vestigial small c conservative, it's an issue I care about. There is nobody in American history who has spent money faster, more, and more recklessly than Donald Trump. I'm a small government conservative. Donald Trump is the candidate who proposes a government big enough to be looking through your bedroom window, big enough to deport 15 million people, big enough to build the prison camps, big enough to deploy the military. So what Donald Trump stands for is not conservatism, it's fascism. And so when you look at the situation and the choice, Kamala Harris is sitting in the Franklin Delano Roosevelt chair. And I would much rather have had in 1940 FDR as president than Charles Lindbergh. And so the choice is precisely the same. This is not about partisanship. And one of the great lies in this moment in American life is that this election is about anything other than the core and fundamental issue. And that issue is the continuity of the peaceful transition of power. Real quick, King George III was obsessed with George Washington. He wanted to know, will he have a bigger kingdom than me, a bigger empire? And he asked often, what will Washington do? And when the king was told, Washington would return home. The king said, when he learned that Washington would retire, that if that's true, and he was astonished, it would make him the greatest man of this or any age. This is the cornerstone of the United States of America. We elect our leaders, and when we fire them, they leave peacefully. There is no compromise to be had on this issue, and there is no compromise to be had with the fascists who have devoured America's conservative party.
Right. Let me get another question in. We have a limited amount of time, so let's get another question in here. I just wonder, though, listening to you, whether there's a disconnect between the media and the pundit classes, the commentariat, and the voters. Because the media, people like yourself, you take seriously what Donald Trump says. I understand that. You take that seriously. But the people don't seem to take it seriously. Critics like you try to stigmatize him as a threat to democracy, a fascist. You've just called him that. Even a Hitler. Let me finish the question. No, let me finish the question and then you answer. That's how it works. Right. Voters don't think that. They think, well, actually, he was none of that last time. What are they talking about?
I appreciate how it works. It's said that there's no dumb questions, but sometimes that's disproved. It's a big country with 340 million people. You are making sweeping and broad generalizations about, I don't know what. We haven't had an election. 100 million plus people will vote. Donald Trump will get a significant percentage of that. The argument that I'm making, the argument that Kamala Harris is making, is essential because it's core to the functioning and the structure of the civilization. Winston Churchill had two observations about America. He said, in a democracy, you get the government you deserve, and that Americans tend to do the right thing after exhausting all the other possibilities. The fact of the matter is that there's 40% of the country that doesn't have $400 cash available. We had wars that lasted for 20 years that started on weapons of mass destruction that weren't there. The American people have lost faith. And Donald Trump is a world-class demagogue. But I reject and will always reject, because there is no proof, there's no evidence whatsoever that there is anything approaching a majoritarian level of support for Trump. There never has been. Trump's electoral calculus is very simple. It's a minority faction, radicalized and passionate, plus enough indifference between people who look at both sides and say, I hate them both. But the fact is, there has never been majority support for Trump in the United States.
I understand that, and I didn't say that there was majority support for Mr. Trump.
No, you did.
Indeed, even if actually I didn't, because I don't think there is. So I wouldn't say something I don't believe in. And even if he does win a majority in the Electoral College, he will not win a majority of the popular vote. I understand all that. So that wasn't what I was saying. What I was saying is that critics like you, and I understand why you do it, and some of the things he says are extremely scary. I understand all that too. But a lot of his support, most of his supporters, and even those who might be considering supporting him, they don't think that. They don't think he's a fascist. They don't think he's a threat to democracy. They remain unconvinced by all of that. And that is why, no matter the most ludicrous thing that he says, for example, like January the 6th was a day of love, is the last thing he said. But even saying things like that doesn't seem to undermine his support.
It doesn't undermine, well, listen, Donald Trump has built a cult of personality in the United States. The 32% of Germans in 1930 that voted for Adolf Hitler likely would have argued that they were voting for, that would likely have argued against the proposition that they were voting for a fascist, as I've described it. They would have said that they were voting for making Germany great again. They would have said that they were voting for freedom or the protection of it. The simple truth is that crowd of people swaying in the audience while Donald Trump maniacally swayed to music on stage, that those people, I reject their judgment. I don't want them to make the decision of who's going to rule over the American people. And thank goodness there's not enough of them to elect Donald Trump. So this is a moment where the presence of a significant portion of the population is not evidence that the majority is in fact in the minority, right? So Donald Trump, in the end, is a philosopher of FUism. In a country where 40% of the people don't have $400 for an emergency, where if you break your leg, you could lose your house. So when the Wall Street financiers bankrupted the housing market in 2008, not a single person goes to jail. The American people by the millions lose their homes. Donald Trump has seized on legitimate grievances with one of the oldest lies there is, that I alone can fix it. If you give me power, I'll make all of your problems go away. And so the thing that Donald Trump does, and he has a very low bar, is he never fails to disappoint his base with regard to causing outrage with the people that they have deep contempt for. And that is the elite which you're describing and you're assigning me into. But I will say this. When you go to Arlington,
you won't, Mr. Schmidt, because we've run out of time. You've had a good chance to have your say, and I appreciate that, and I understand, as I'm sure our listeners will, the points you're making. But I'm going to have to end it there. We need to move on.